my father and my brother did this." The young maid's voice trembled as she looked straight at the billionaire across the marble floor. The room froze, because everyone knew those words were not just an accusation. They were a storm about to break a powerful family apart. The maid stood in the center of the grand living hall, her hands shaking but her eyes steady. Around her stretched a world that did not belong to her. Polished marble floors that reflected the gold light of chandeliers. Tall glass windows that showed a quiet garden outside. Walls covered with paintings worth more money than she would earn in a lifetime. And standing before her was the man who owned it all. Alexander Hale, one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. People whispered that his companies built half the city's skyline. Asterisk, they said, his name could move markets and change lives overnight. But in that moment, Alexander did not look powerful. He looked confused. Because the maid standing in front of him had just said something no one had ever dared to say inside the Hale mansion. "My father and my brother did this." And the way she said it carried something deeper than fear. It carried truth. The staff stood frozen along the walls. No one dared move. Alexander slowly stepped forward. His voice stayed calm, but the weight inside it filled the room. "Tell me exactly what you mean." The maid swallowed hard. Her name was Alina. She had worked in the mansion for only 6 months. Quiet, careful, always polite. The kind of worker who kept her head down and never caused trouble. Until today, because today something had crossed a line that could not be ignored. But to understand why Alina stood there now, trembling yet unbroken, the story had begun long before this moment. Long before she ever stepped inside this mansion. Alina had grown up in a small town far from the shining towers of the city. Her home had been a simple wooden house near the edge of a wheat field. Summers smelled of dry grass and warm wind. Winters brought cold mornings where frost covered the windows like thin white lace. Her father had once been a proud man, a mechanic who could fix anything with patience and rough hands that always smelled of oil. Her older brother had been strong and charming, someone the whole town liked. When Alina was a little girl, she believed her family was safe and good. But life changes people in quiet ways. After their mother passed away from illness, something inside her father broke. He stopped laughing. Bills piled up. Work became harder to find. Her brother began chasing easy money, and easy money rarely comes without a price. By the time Alina turned 18, the warmth of her childhood home had faded into something colder. Arguments filled the evenings. The smell of alcohol replaced the scent of dinner cooking in the kitchen. Alina knew she had to leave. Not because she stopped loving them, but because she feared who they were becoming. So she packed a small bag and took a bus to the city with nothing but courage and a promise to herself. She would build a better life. The city was loud and overwhelming. Car horns echoed through crowded streets. Neon lights reflected on wet pavement after rain. People hurried everywhere with faces that never looked up. For weeks, Alina searched for work. She cleaned small apartments, washed dishes in restaurants, and slept in a shared room above a bakery that smelled like fresh bread every morning. Then one day she heard about a job opening, a housekeeper position in one of the most famous homes in the city, the Hale Mansion. Everyone knew the name Alexander Hale, but few people knew the man. Alina expected someone cold and distant. Instead, when she first saw him months ago, he had simply nodded politely and said something that surprised her. "Work with dignity, and you will always be respected here." Those words stayed with her, because respect had been rare in her life. And for a while everything seemed peaceful. Until last night. It had been late when Alina finished cleaning the upper hallway. The mansion was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. She was about to return to her small room in the staff quarters when she heard a voice outside near the service gate. A familiar voice. Her heart dropped. Her brother. She moved closer to the window and looked down. There he was, standing beside another man. And when the porch light turned on, Alina felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The second man was someone she recognized instantly. Richard Hale, Alexander's father. A powerful figure in the family business who still held influence over many decisions. They were speaking in low voices. But the night air carried enough for Alina to understand the truth. It's unfolding below. Money, threats, and something far darker. Her brother had been hired, not for honest work, but to scare someone, a man who had refused to sell land to the Hale Company. Alina stood frozen behind the curtain as pieces of the conversation fell into place like stones dropping into deep water. And then came the final words that made her stomach twist. Make sure the man understands that refusal has consequences. Her brother nodded, and Alina knew exactly what that meant. The kind of pressure that ruins lives. The kind of fear that forces people to give up everything. She barely slept that night. Because Alina knew two things. Her father and brother had stepped into something dangerous. And the man who owned this mansion had no idea what was happening in his name. Morning came with pale sunlight sliding across the marble floors. The mansion woke slowly. Staff preparing breakfast, gardeners watering flowers outside, but Elena's heart beat like a drum. She could stay silent. Pretend she heard nothing. Keep her job. Or she could speak and risk losing everything. But Alina remembered the words Alexander Hale had said months earlier. Work with dignity. And dignity meant truth. So now she stood in front of him in the great hall, and the truth had finally been spoken. My father and my brother did this. Alexander studied her face carefully. He saw fear there, but also something stronger. Honesty. His voice lowered. Tell me everything. Alina explained what she had heard. Every word. Every detail. The room remained silent except for her quiet voice. When she finished, no one spoke for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. Alexander turned slowly toward the long hallway leading to his private office. At the end of it stood his father. Richard Hale had been listening. The older man walked forward calmly, his expression hard. This girl misunderstood a conversation. Alexander did not raise his voice. But something in his eyes changed. Because Alexander Hale had built his empire on one simple belief. Power means nothing without integrity. And now he faced a truth that tested that belief more than anything in his life. He looked back at Alina. Then he looked at his father. The silence stretched heavy in the air. Finally, Alexander spoke. A house built on fear will collapse sooner or later. The words echoed through the hall. Richard's expression tightened. You are choosing the word of a maid over your own family. Alexander's voice remained steady. I am choosing what is right. Those standing along the walls felt something shift in that moment. Not anger. Not chaos. But honor. Alexander turned to the head of security. Bring the authorities. No one moves until the truth is fully known. Shock rippled through the room. Even Richard Hale seemed stunned. Because no one expected Alexander to take that step, especially against his own blood. Minutes later, the front gates opened as investigators arrived. Questions were asked. Records examined. Phone calls traced. The truth slowly surfaced. Alina had been right. And the evidence was undeniable. Richard Hale had quietly used intimidation tactics to force business deals for years without his son knowing. And Elena's brother had been one of the people hired for those tasks. As officers escorted Richard away for questioning, the staff watched in silent disbelief. Alexander stood still in the center of the hall. The weight of betrayal rested heavily on his shoulders, but his voice remained calm. Justice must never depend on wealth or family. Alina felt tears warm her eyes. Not because of fear anymore, but because someone powerful had finally chosen truth over comfort. Later that afternoon, something remarkable happened. The mansion doors opened. Employees gathered quietly in the hall. Gardeners, drivers, cooks, cleaners. They stood.
Ow.
Together in respectful silence. And one by one, they began to clap. Not loudly, not wildly, but with quiet pride. Because they had witnessed something rare. A man who proved that integrity is stronger than power. Alexander turned toward Alina. For the first time that day, a small smile appeared. You reminded me of something important, that courage does not depend on status. Then he said words that many in that room would never forget. The strongest voice in a room is often the one that speaks truth when it is hardest. Alina felt her hands stop shaking, because for the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost: hope. And somewhere in the city beyond those tall windows, the sun broke through the clouds, a quiet reminder that truth always finds its way into the light. Stories like this remind us that real strength is not about money or influence. It is about the courage to stand for what is right, even when standing feels lonely. Respect, integrity, and quiet bravery can change the course of any story. If this story moved you. Share where you are watching from in the comments, and tell us what you would have done in Alexander's place. Subscribe for more powerful stories that honor silent courage and the people who remind the world what integrity truly means.